Hello, this is Worklife from BBC News with Sally Bundock and David Eads.
The sustainability drive by big business steps up a gear. Is it enough?
Live from London, that's our top story today, Monday the 7th of October. The company behind Persil, Dove, Pot Noodles, Marmite, there's so many more. It's Unilever and pledges to halve its use of new plastics in just 6 years. We have spoken to the boss. Also in the programme, how much can one tweet cost you? Well, if you run a US basketball team and you tweet about Hong Kong, the answer is a lot. We'll explain a little later. And what is this? Well, it's a McDonald's McRib barbecue sandwich. We'll tell you what its early seasonal appearance in the US this year has to do with the US-China trade war.
We'll also be getting the inside track on juggling work and family life with the co-founder of Amazing If. It's a company coaching staff at some of the UK's biggest firms on career development. So today we want to know, as National Work-Life Week begins here in the UK, could your work-life balance be better? What are your tips or indeed your frustrations? Do let us know. Just use the hashtag BBC Worklife.
A very warm welcome. This is our new business show. It's called Work Life. We focus on the issues affecting your work and the life you lead. And we start today with the global consumer products giant Unilever, whose brands most of us use, like we've mentioned some of them, Persil, Dove, Marmite, many others. It's pledging to halve its use of new plastics by 2025 and collect or reuse more plastic than it sells. In fact, around 2.5 billion of us are using Unilever products every single day, covering 400 brands, from cleaning products, things like shampoo, food. So how radical is Unilever's new plastics policy? Well, the issue of this kind of waste is mounting, with the global market for the stuff growing at around 3% each year, and is expected to be worth almost $1.2 trillion by 2020. And bear in mind, the world is throwing away 300 million tonnes of plastic waste each year. Here's the boss of Unilever with more on his company's plans.
The challenge is to make sure that plastic stays in the economy and out of the environment. So we want to create this circular approach where plastic is retained in the economic cycle, the circular economy, and doesn't leach out into the environment and the oceans. We would welcome, and indeed are stimulating, the creation of an infrastructure of recycling companies that are able to take refuse and turn it into high quality material that can be used. And we think that this commitment that we're making creates an economic incentive for that chain to fall into line. And we work very closely with the recycling companies and with governments at municipal and national level.
That's Alan Jope. We're joined by Madeline Cuff, who's Deputy Editor of Business Green. Madeline, thanks very much for coming in. Unilever's a huge company. It's making a 50% cut in new plastics. Alan Jope's talking about the circular economy. What is not to like?
Well, we've already seen some plastics campaigners come out and say that this doesn't go far enough. They want to see a larger reduction in plastics. But actually, given the size of Unilever's company, it's quite a big commitment from them. We're going to see huge investment from them in new recycling plants, in new technologies to recycle that really tricky, hard to recycle plastic waste, such as plastic sachets, and in new business models, such as refill bottles for consumers, so they'll see things delivered to their house that they'll have to then return the packaging for. So it really is quite a big change for Unilever.
It's a big change. It's going to be an expensive change, and it's not clear yet whether this will be passed on to the consumer in terms of prices going up. But do you think, from Unilever's perspective and other companies like Unilever, they're weighing up the environment we're in right now, what millennials supposedly want, and feel this is something they have to do?
Yeah, they're weighing up a few things. I mean, consumer pressure has been absolutely huge in pushing companies to take more action on plastic waste. We've seen that it's one of the top issues that people think about when they're choosing which brands to buy from. But they're also weighing up the threat of regulatory pressure. In the UK, at least, the government is considering bringing in a tax for new packaging that doesn't contain a certain amount of recycled plastic in it, and to try and make producers of packaging pay for the cleanup of it at the end of its life. So they're seeing which way the wind is blowing when it comes to regulatory change and responding to consumer pressure.
Is it fair for Alan Jope to be saying, come on, authorities as well, improve your refuse collection, improve your recycling, don't let us take all the burden?
Yeah, absolutely. We used to export quite a lot of our plastic packaging and other recyclables to China. We can't do that anymore, so we need to start recycling more in the UK. But the problem is, in the UK, every council across the country has different recycling rules, and so there's a huge consumer confusion about what can go in recycling and where, and that really needs to be standardised if companies are going to respond across the board to this.
Yeah, we got the new regime in Tunbridge Wells this last week.
Is it confusing?
Confused, you will be.
Absolutely,
yeah.
and also the packaging is all sorts of different bits and bobs. You don't know which bit you can recycle and which you can't. Thanks so much for coming in. Many of you commented about this story today as well. Some of you are saying it's great what Unilever's doing. Others of you say, actually, I don't have time to check on plastic and recycling. I just go for the cheapest option in the shops. Let's now take you through some other stories in the news today. Hundreds of thousands of people who booked holidays with Thomas Cook before it collapsed will be able to start applying for refunds from today. The Civil Aviation Authority, which has spent the past fortnight bringing stranded holiday makers home, has set up a website to deal with claims.
Talks to resolve a damaging strike at the US car giant GM have broken down. Negotiations between General Motors and the United Auto Workers Union stalled on Sunday. Disagreements over pay and job security. Now, this strike so far has cost GM $1 billion in earnings.
Banking giant HSBC is reported to be planning a major cull. The Financial Times says the bank could slash up to 10,000 jobs to reduce costs. It employs almost 240,000 around the world. So far, it's declined to comment on the story.
General manager of the Houston Rockets basketball team has apologised after a tweet in support of Hong Kong protesters led to a Chinese backlash.
Yeah, the coach has been backpedaling in a major way after fierce criticism from Chinese fans, sponsors and commercial partners, with Chinese broadcasters saying they would no longer broadcast Rockets games.
Yeah, well, Sarah Toms joins us now from Singapore. Careless talk costs, well, a lot of money, Sarah.
Well, yeah, and the Houston Rockets are definitely going to have to do some fancy footwork to recover from this backlash from China. Now, as you said, Daryl Morley, the team's coach, he sent a tweet initially on Friday that said, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." Now, this caused a massive uproar in China. Now, NBA games draw huge viewership there. Millions watch the games, mostly through streaming platforms. And since the tweet, Chinese broadcasters and streaming platforms said they will no longer broadcast the Rockets games. On Sunday, the Chinese Basketball Association also suspended cooperation with the Houston Rockets sportswear brand Li Ning and also the club sponsor in China. Now, it's a hugely sensitive issue. Hong Kong has seen months of anti-government protests. Protesters say they are fighting for democracy, but Beijing is concerned that the demonstrations that have grown increasingly violent could spill over to mainland China.
OK, thank you so much, Sarah. As with these stories, you have to follow the money, don't you, really? Let's have a look then, talking of money, at how financial markets have been doing. It's been a rocky start to the week, actually, for Asia. Ignore that number on Hong Kong. That is not at all any reaction to the weekend's violence and protests which took place again in Hong Kong. That's Friday's close, because Hong Kong was closed today, as was China, as was Australia. So although a bit of a quieter week in Asia, we saw declines. Let's have a look at Europe, if it's followed suit, because you may remember, if you're a markets watcher, on Friday in Europe and the US, we saw a bumper end to the week. Most stock markets closing much higher on the day, but as you can see, pretty flat in Europe. What's really on the minds of investors is the fact that this week we will see talks resume between the US and China on trade, and rumours coming out of China show that they are not optimistic about how they will go. Now to the US, where McRib season, a limited period when McDonald's offers a popular pork sandwich. It's come early this year. Why? Well, as Vivian Nunes explains, it could be thanks to the ongoing US-China trade war.
Officials from China and the US will meet in Washington on Thursday, the latest attempt to resolve the trade war. The tit-for-tat dispute has gone on for more than a year now, and it hasn't gone unnoticed by consumers. Take, for example, McDonald's decision to release its McRib pork sandwich on Monday. The popular menu item is released for a limited time in the US each autumn. This year, it's coming out several weeks early. Social media chatter points to the trade war. China slapped import taxes on American pork in retaliation for US tariffs in 2018, leading to a pork glut here in the US and, so the theory goes, more McRibs. But there's another possibility too, relevance. McDonald's has been making a big push to attract more customers lately. It recently invested in drive-through technology that updates menus according to the time of day and even the weather. But the US fast food market is increasingly competitive, and seasonal items get customers excited. So whether it's the trade war or just old-fashioned marketing, McRib season is upon us.
Right, time now for our daily look beyond the headlines, and to do that we're joined by consumer journalist, columnist, broadcaster, you name it, Harry Wallop. Harry, very good to see you here.
Good morning.
Now,
Shall I
let's start
crack on?
with...
You start
Well,
with this?
you, I don't
All
mind.
right, Amazon Workplace.
Go for it, David.
This is a story that you picked out of the Sunday Times.
Actually, yesterday's Sunday Times, but it's been picked up by a couple of papers and websites this morning. They did an investigation into Amazon warehouses, particularly in the UK, and how many ambulance call-outs there were to workers in distress, ill, fallen off ladders, 2 cases of electric shock. And they looked over the last 3 years at 11 of the warehouses. It was a sort of freedom of information request. And there were 606 call-outs. And there was one particular warehouse in Bedfordshire, just north of London, 95 times from 2016 to August this year. Now, Amazon, of course, say this is far lower than the national average. Their workplaces are very safe. But the Sunday Times then did compare that one particular warehouse where there had been 95 call-outs, about 1,800 workers, very similar number of people working at the Bridgend Ford motor plant in Wales, and I think that was 19 ambulance call-outs. And Ocado, online supermarket with lots of robots, again a similar number of workers, only 3 ambulance call-outs in the same period.
And this just adds fuel to the fire, doesn't it? Because there's been lots of investigations into what life is like for a worker in an Amazon factory. And we're coming up to that really, really busy season. We've got the Black Friday, we've got the various sales days, and then Christmas itself.
And you know, Harry, you've been to one.
I have been, yeah. Well, I've been to they've got a robotic factory just outside Manchester, by Manchester Airport. And on the one hand, it is hugely impressive and it is very slick. But it's clearly hard work. You know, you think it's quite easy just picking a book out and putting it in a crate. All the workers wear safety gloves because they're kind of shoving their hands into these robotic wardrobes with all the stuff going around. And they are all monitored. There's cameras everywhere. And again, where Amazon say this is, you know, to improve efficiency for the workers' own safety. But there's no doubt some workers do feel under pressure.
Interesting story. Let's have a look then at something The Guardian's discussing today, which is Saudi Arabia's push to increase it as a popular destination for foreign travellers.
Yeah, this is fascinating because Saudi Arabia is not top of my list of places to visit as a tourist, but they've just announced that you can now stay in a hotel room as a tourist if you are unmarried, and you can share a hotel room, which previously was absolutely not allowed. You had to prove that you were married if you wanted to share a hotel room.
Well, they've got work to do, haven't they, in terms of the image of Saudi Arabia at the moment. And yet at the same time, they've got a guy, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, who has started to push change, particularly for women.
Absolutely. So women can now drive. They're now allowed a driving licence. They're now allowed to travel abroad without permission from a male guardian. I mean, it seems astonishing that that wasn't allowed before. But tourism is very much part of the policy. Can Saudi survive in a post-oil age? And they are building fun fairs and, you know, huge, enormous skyscrapers that they hope will bring tourism in. I mean, they're trying to double the number of tourists.
Very competitive, isn't it? Because Dubai's right there, wanting to get that
Qatar is doing the same.
Indeed, tourism market.
Yeah, there's a tourism Twitter account in Saudi now, opening its doors and its hearts to the world, is its advert.
Well,
All right.
Just a hint of cynicism there, but we'll take that. Harry, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, tell us, would you go? #WorkLife is how to get in touch. Still to come, though. We all know flying is bad for the planet because of carbon emissions. But what about the rubbish we produce while we're in the air?
Yeah, we're going to check out new research into how to eliminate mile-high single-use plastics, wrappers and headphones.
You're with WorkLife from BBC News. First, though, nearly 3/4 of drivers want councils to take action against motorists who leave the engine running while they're parked. That's according to new RAC research.
Yeah, only a handful of councils use existing powers to hand out £20 fines. Well, joining us now is Nicholas Lies, who's Head of Roads Policy at the RAC. Nicholas, is this realistic? I mean, goodness knows how many keep their engine ticking over.
Well, I hope it is realistic because the legislation is already in place. So Section 42 of the Road Traffic Act 1988 specifically outlaws unnecessary engine idling, and there is actually a determination and a will now from drivers to ask for councils to actually enforce this. So we know that local authorities are under a lot of financial pressures, but civil enforcement officers could look at this as part of their scope.
Yeah, but as David points out, civil enforcement officers are extremely busy and under enormous pressure, and some might say this is not high on the priority list.
Well, I would argue that drivers now see engine idling and air quality issues as increasingly important areas. And certainly when you look at what is going on in our towns and cities, we do have air quality problems. Pollution has been linked to around 40,000 deaths, and certainly that something needs to be done about it. So what we're saying is that drivers want to see councils take action against unnecessary engine idling, and it's that the laws and the legislation is there, so councils really have an opportunity here to seize.
Do you have to focus, if you're going to do this, Nicholas, focus on certain opportunities, put it that way, down by the school gates or something like that? Because, you know, you cannot monitor it across every road and every street.
Yes, I think that's absolutely the case. Certainly there are going to be hotspots where local authorities should be focusing on. We would certainly like to see that outside of schools, outside of hospitals, in some city centre locations, around shops and perhaps in car parks as well, because these are typically areas where there's the highest footfall, so there are going to be more people that will be breathing in this poor air quality. But it's also important from a driver's It's also important from a driver's point of view.
Nicholas, we'll have to leave it there. Sorry to interrupt you. Nicholas Lyles there from the RAC. This is WorkLife. A reminder of our top story today. One of the world's biggest consumer products companies, that's Unilever, it's pledged to halve its use of new plastics by 2025. And I have to say, looking at this story this morning, I'm amazed at all the things they make.
Yeah, I know.
All the stuff we use.
In plastic bottles.
Yeah, and in other type of packaging.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. Right now, for many people, juggling careers with family life can feel like a constant battle. I think.
No idea what you're talking about, David.
Nor me. In the UK alone, though, a recent poll found that around 13 million working parents are grappling with just getting that balance right.
Yes, I want to talk to the person who has got it right. Well, our next guest might be that person. It's Helen Tupper. She says she's able to help. Co-founder of Amazing If, which works with organisations and individuals to try and focus on career development and get the work-life balance right. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
So one of the elements that you say is key is the squiggling career, is that correct? What is that?
The squiggling career is the reality that a lot of people now find themselves in. So we used to talk a lot about staircase-like careers and climbing a ladder, and people would kind of progress up that ladder in quite a predictable and linear fashion. But the reality of careers that a lot of people are experiencing today is that there's a lot more change happening in them. There's a lot more fluidity. They're moving in and out of industry, in and out of roles, sometimes in and out of organisations much more frequently. And we term that in Amazing If the squiggly career. And the reality is that squiggly careers take a completely different skill set to be able to navigate that and find work that really works for you.
Because I think for a lot of people starting out in what you might call a career are hugely ambitious too, aren't they? They want to do more than might seem sensible when you're a bit older, and that sets the tone that everyone else has to try and match.
Yeah, absolutely. And organisations want to harness that ambition. That's a fantastic thing for organisations. The challenge is when we try to create a one-size-fits-all career or a one-size-fits-all way of working, when actually people are seeking more individualised way of working, whether that's flexible work or the types of roles that they want to do, or moving from full-time to part-time to contracts.
But careers have been disrupted for quite a few years now, and working flexibly, having this work-life balance has been talked about for a long time. But for who is it really a reality?
So I think working parents, I mean, it's a reality for everyone. Everybody is seeking this if we look at the research.
But it's not a reality for everyone, is it really? When you think about the Amazon workers in the factory where the number of ambulance call-outs is higher than at other factories, for example.
I think the reality is that everybody is looking for this. For some people, it's easier for them to get it than others. So, for example, if you're in a really progressive organisation that already has great work-life policies, that's fantastic. But if we look at, you know, I'm a trustee for the Working Families charity, and if we look at 2/3 of low-income workers are calling their free helpline for support. For certain individuals, it's certainly harder for them to get the support they need, which is why we lobby for so much change in policy to support gig workers, contract workers, low income.
That's absolutely the point, isn't it? Because flexible working works really well for many big organisations if it suits them. And that's what they're interested in, making it fit for them rather than necessarily for those who come in on short-term contracts, do the job and move them on.
I think where organisations can work for both parties, so they can understand what the employees' needs are and how they can do their best work, that takes confidence and awareness from the individual, and where they have the policies. I think where the two places meet, that's where it gets to be really powerful. I think of it as just the employer's policies being implemented. That's away from the let's individualise work, and that's more one size fits all for everybody.
And I think it's important to note as well, it's not just about parents, is it? I mean, lots of the statistics are about the fact that most parents want to work flexibly, but only less than half actually achieve that. But people want to work flexibly because they want to pursue other careers, or they're starting a business, or they're looking after elderly relatives. It's all sorts of circumstances, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's why we need to be listening. And National Work-Life Week is all about listening to that, because people are coming at this, as you say, from different places with different needs. We can't just have one policy and that to fit everybody. Employers and employees need to have transparent, open conversations about what's working today, what we might need to change so that we can make work for everybody.
Yeah, well, I hope you get it right, Helen, because I think we will both agree that we spend our lives feeling that we don't. You know, it's an impossible, never-ending curve.
We're spinning lots of plates.
Yeah, indeed. Good to have you.
Brilliant, thank you.
And they often smash, I have to say, if I'm honest. Many of you have been in touch, by the way. We're going to mention some of your comments a little later.
Yes, work-life balance. Could yours be better? Well, first of all, we know that flying is bad for the environment. What about all that rubbish we produce when we're in the air, or at least we use it maybe? And new exhibitions try to find inventive ways to cut back on that. Have a look at this.
We've got the seaweed capsules here for items such as dressings or milk, and we're also looking here at we've looked at how we can use byproducts to create items that were otherwise plastics. So the meal tray itself is actually created from coffee grounds. We've looked at things such as the lid for the dessert dish is made out of the sort of waffle cone that you would have an ice cream in.
What we're really keen to do is to say, look, where a flight might be coming from America, where they've also got quite strict standards on food and plant health, we should be able to recycle more of that waste that comes off the plane.
Look at all that stuff we use on a plane.
I know, terrifying, isn't it?
So let's talk about what you've been saying about work-life balance. As we've mentioned, in the UK, it is National Work-Life Week. So Phil McClelland, thanks for getting in touch. He says, I work 3.5 days a week, with the other 1.5 being spent as a parent. Weekends are always with the family. Great balance. Well done, Phil.
Weekends are big in, aren't they?
Absolutely.
If you can get it. Here's Ben Morris's view. I fight with it every day, knowing what's right, when to turn off the phone and computer, but modern day tech makes it so much easier, or worse, especially managing a company in a different country.
Yeah, it has its pros and cons, doesn't it? Also, you've been in touch about plastics, as I mentioned earlier. So we asked you if you think about company policy when it comes to plastic and their environmental policy when it comes to where you shop and what you buy. Gareth says, to be honest, no. If I'm getting a good deal, I don't look for companies' environmental policy. It's the first thing on my mind before I purchase. And Jerome says, supply chains are so complex, I doubt any company really knows what its environmental policy is. That's quite a good point, really.
Well, it might be true, but you've just got to think it's getting into our consciousness, isn't it? Gradually an awareness that some things just seem a bit wrong.
That's all from Work Life for today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye for now.